So Patricia McBride, it's so nice to meet you, and it's wonderful that you're doing this taping.
It's a thrill for me to be able to come here and work with them and passing on the way I had learned from Mr. Balanchine when he made the pieces. So it's such a joy and a pleasure.
Two very special roles that he created for you in Harlequinade and in Midsummer Night's Dream, and both relatively close to each other. Midsummer Night's Dream 1962, Harlequinade 1965. And especially Midsummer, you were very, very young.
Yes. It's one of the first things that he choreographed for me. It was just fabulous to see what he did. It was so amusing and fun, and Mr. B was in great spirit making these things. He was adorable, showing everything, and I still have visions of how he looked showing it.
It's so interesting that they're both ballets that have a close relation to his childhood, because he had been in a play of Midsummer Night's Dream in St. Petersburg as a young student, and he had danced in the original Harlequinade, Petit Pas, at the Mariinsky in St. Petersburg. So I wondered if he had brought some of that experience into the studio when he was making the ballets.
Oh, I'm sure, because Petit Pas, he loved Petit Pas choreography, and that was his foundation. So it's there, it's like progression, and then he took ballet in a different direction entirely he could do every style. He could be very classical, and then the avant-garde, he could do, extraordinary, daring, very contemporary works. But the classics were always beautiful. He also wanted to show me some of the Commedia dell'arte and the style, some of the heads and the way you held your body. And it was very classical with a little twist.
Yeah, yeah.
And, but he worked so quickly. And he could do the solos that we did today. He did them in 45 minutes.
Is that typical, or was it very specific to these ballets?
No, he always, from the beginning till the end. When I was very young and worked with him, and the later ballets that he did with me, it was always so quick and easy to work with him. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Things would just go through his body and he could show beautifully the musicality. The movement was there. He had I just tried to copy him. I tried to catch the head, how he wanted me to move. And I would always tell the pianist, like it was usually Gordon Belsner, who was a wonderful pianist, mm-hmm. and he knew exactly what Mr. Balanchine wanted, and Mr. Balanchine would set the tempo. And he just danced it for me. I danced behind him and just tried to copy.
You just absorbed.
And it was so extraordinary. I was always like almost flabbergasted with the beauty that would come out. How to use the arms, the heads. Everybody thinks of Balanchine as only legs, and it's very cold, it's very dry. No, he wanted you to move and use your head in a certain way. Use your very classical, beautiful écarté was écarté is here, effacé is here. It was so clear, and I always felt in his classes we'd learn what he wanted, so we were ready.
Right.
He didn't have to teach us how to do anything, because we learned from classes with him every day. He had such a trust in us, mm-hmm. all of us.
Yeah.
And did such beautiful things. He once told me, he felt that he, of all choreographers, did more for so many different ballerinas, not just for one.
Yeah.
He'd say, "Oh, I have a garden full of beautiful flowers, and you're all different."
Both of the roles in these two ballets used a lot of arm movement. It seems like they're particularly arm heavy in a way. For a lot of the port de bras in Balanchine's ballets often seems just quite natural, but here they're very specific to what the characters are saying. And I wondered, whether he talked about that or whether you noticed something specific about how he used the arms in Midsummer and separately in Harlequinade. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, when he'd show something, he'd show the whole body.
Mm-hmm.
The head, and that was important to him. I know in Harlequinade, he wanted me to do my arms back.
Yes.
Back with the head. I just watched him and tried to do it. I was so lucky because in Harlequinade, I had my most wonderful partner was Edward Villella. Cute story too, because when I did the premiere of it, Mr. B knocked on my door and he handed me a key, a gold key. It was a real key. He was given the key to a city, and I'm not going to mention what city it was, but it was, you get to the keys to the city.
Right, right.
So they gave him this, so he brought it, because I have the key, and I'm on the balcony, waving the key, and I throw the key, and
he releases you?
Hopefully he catches it. And so he brought me the key, and I was like it was so cute. And he had this sheepish smile on his face when he gave me the key, and I was like so touched that he would have done that.
Harlequinade and Midsummer have something in common too, which is that the story kind of comes to an end at a certain point, and then it's really just dances.
That's
right. They're structurally kind of similar. It's interesting what you say about Harlequinade with the arms, because there is this theme of the lark, right, in the second act of Harlequinade. And it seems to me, just watching you coach the two variations, that bird-like movement does kind of inform the way that you use the arms. Even in the first variation, there's a little bit of a bird. Did he ever talk about that, or is that something that you thought about?
No, we didn't really talk that much about the character. I was so astounded at how beautiful the movement was, and I just tried to do it as best as I could and try to please him as much as I could.
Did you feel like there was a bird-like quality to
in the second
Columbine?
act, definitely.
Yeah.
And he told me, I have an entrance, and he told me there was a fountain in the middle. He said, pick the water up, drink the water, and go. And because there were birds around me, I just did that. And it was a two-act ballet.
Yeah.
And the two acts were very different.
Yes.
I always felt like a different character in the second act. It was much more lyrical, and I loved doing both the first act and the second act.
Yeah.
The first act was more a soubrette, and the second act was more like a more classical, lyrical.
By the time that variation came around, it was almost an abstract ballet, so you were almost like just a classical ballerina at that moment, more so than in the first act.
Yes, you could say that. And he never tried to be inventive, but it was so inventive. He never tried to make you go into a most awkward step and that you work on it and you get it. It always flowed beautifully, naturally.
There's that very beautiful arm movement, which I wondered, do you think that it originally was supposed to evoke clapping, like in Raimonda? It faintly reminds me of the clap in Raimonda. Do you think there's any relation to that? Or like a tambourine? Or?
No, I never thought of it that way.
Because when I saw you in the video, I immediately thought of that.
Oh, gosh, I don't know. I think it's very different.
Mm-hmm.
But this is much more lyrical, and I felt, you can really feel it as you're dancing and feel the music. You get kind of transported to something which is what you want to do on stage sometimes.
On the video that I watched,
different.
you gave, at the end of the variation, you did 3 kisses.
There are 3.
Oh.
To that?
Yeah.
You do, well, because in the old opera houses, there were the boxes, and you kiss that box. And then for the audience is the third one. 1, 2. To the audience is the last one.
And what about Columbine's walk? When she comes on, it's a very sort of special walk. Did he say anything about that?
We always tried to work like on running in classes, working, stretching your knees and pointing your feet. And he just kind of said just walk, and he didn't really tell me. But I've learned probably from classes that he did, or I always loved to walk on
Very
stage and run on
soft.
stage. I loved it. It felt so wonderful because you use your whole body. He did work on the arms, these beautiful arms. It's so
He showed all of
unusual.
that.
Yes, and this, I remember him so well showing this one. Go back, look at your hand, go back. And it was so beautiful. I always loved this solo.
It has a particular softness that seems very special to this solo.
You could hear a pin drop. It was so quiet, and the music was so beautiful. So you were enraptured with the movement, the playing with your arms, and the musicality.
What did it feel like to dance it?
Oh, it was heaven to dance. I just loved every movement because the choreography was so beautiful to dance.
You could really luxuriate in the movement.
Yeah, and it was much easier than the first act.
Is it easier?
For me,
Because it seems
easy.
like there's so much control.
No, it was very, because you weren't dancing, it was slow. The movements were slow.
Of course, the music in the second act variation is part of this larger theme of the larks. I mean, Drigo wrote it as this sort of ballet within the ballet.
I was thinking maybe copying the birds. Maybe that's why I got some. I was like playing with copying the birds when I came out.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
That's why I probably did that.
Well, it's in the music, really, somehow.
Well, he just told me to take water and run away from Eddie and go back.
I wondered, do you think he was channeling sort of a more old-fashioned type of movement, specifically because of it was Harlequinade?
It could be that he remembered it from when he was in the Mariinsky, that he had memories of it. Though there's a story too how we got to do it. I think it was Mr. Obukov's wife. She brought the music. It was in Russia, and when she left Russia, she brought this music, and it was in a trunk for years. Now, I don't know if this is a true story, but I heard that she discovered the music and brought it to Mr. Balanchine. The Drigo score,
yeah, which would have it would have elicited lots of childhood memories for him. Because
and he used lots of children in it too, dancing like adults.
There's the children's Harlequinade, Ballet.
That's right.
Which, interestingly enough, the choreographer Alexei Ratmansky, when he did his reconstruction of Harlequinade using the notes, he said that the children's Ballet is actually very close to the original steps.
Oh, really?
So Balanchine remembered.
He remembered all that. This was a 2-act ballet, and there were many principals' roles, which was wonderful for the company to have so many beautiful roles for everyone to dance. And he had a lot to do getting this, and we didn't have a lot of rehearsal for it. We didn't have studio space because we would rehearse from, class was 10:30 to 12, and then 12 to 2 we would rehearse. Then because we had the school in the same place as the company at that time. So 7 to 10 at night, we were working from 7 to 10 at night, and then the next morning. So he didn't have a lot of time, and there was a lot to get together. I don't know how many weeks we rehearsed it. Maybe we had 3 or 4 weeks, 5 hours a day, and he had core to do. The second act is big.
Yeah.
So when he did my solo and he did the lovers section, he would go on to something else. And he'd leave us, we would go over it, but he was there every second working on the ballet. And they were in sections. He did he could work. He did wonderful things for the children's ballet, like he'd always have the students, and when he added that, it was extraordinary what he did.
Yeah.
That was really probably what he remembered.
Yeah.
Da 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 da. Everybody, the whole step and the way it works is extraordinary.
Yeah, yeah. Do you feel like he'd made it in your image in some way? Did he take things from who you were at the time?
I think he knew me very well, and he wanted to show me off like he showed everyone off. He wanted to show each of his the dancers he worked with. And it was such a wonderful role. I was very young when I did it. and to have the responsibility of doing 2 acts at that time.
So when he remade Harlequinade in 1973 and he extended it, did your role change at all?
No.
It remained exactly the same.
The same. The session that we're working on with was to stage the original, what I remember doing, the original. So I was trying to just instill in her, though she's so beautiful, it's such a pleasure to work with her, but I was just trying to instill what Balanchine had taught me to pass it on to her.
Yeah.
And if Mr. B were here and he would be working with Ashley, he might ask her to do something different with her arms, you know, but it was so clear what he did.
Talking about arms, Midsummer, that variation is so much about the arms. The arms say so many different things. And I wondered, what are some of the different meanings of the different movements of the arms in your Hermia solo?
It's a beautiful, long, long solo. A lot of running. It kind of taught me how to run in space, because the State Theater is huge and you really have to cover space. And he had me moving really well. And but the arms are like, there's a lot of this, which he showed me so beautifully, da 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 da. And it's so with the music, you know, that the feeling, it's a feeling, and you're filled with angst because you can't find Lysander, and you have to find him, searching for him. That's all Mr. B said. You're looking for him, finding him. And there's some such beautiful movements with just the arm doing this, and it
oh,
shows,
woe is me.
Yes, oh, that's exactly it. And so it comes out in the choreography. It shows your...
Did he really speak of spider webs that you were
Yes, he did.
brushing away?
He said you're pushing away. But that was, I think, when we filmed it, he was more into that. And he did this so fast, too. He just choreographed it, like, so quickly. But I noticed there are a few things in the solo that there's a step that they don't do anymore.
Which is what?
The glissade lunge here. There are a few different places that they do now. But you know how it changes from dancer to dancer, and when you have different coaches, people who teach the new generation on things, just change.
Did it evolve in the time that you danced it, or did it remain?
No.
It has an element of melodrama, the solo, but I
It
feel like it
does.
also has a little bit of an element of humor. It's not totally serious, right? Or what's your...
I feel it's very serious.
Yeah, you don't think he was a little bit
not in the
tongue-in-cheek?
solo, not in the solo at all. Not at all. In the lovers section, it's tongue-in-cheek.
But this is a moment of total
But this
seriousness.
I took it very seriously. You know, you could really get into it, I think.
And you were 19 when he made this.
And I did it like, you know, we did it a lot. It was such a big smash success.
So how did it change when you moved from City Center to Lincoln Center? Did it expand, or did Balanchine already?
We grew, and we learned to dance and cover space like we had never done before. Because I don't know how Mr. Balanchine did all those incredible masterpieces. I don't know how we fit Symphony and C on that stage. So running off and on stage, you know, doing Tarantella, I did opening night, we did Tarantella, covering the space, and we didn't have a lot of time to get used to that space. We had done tours in Europe, we did all over the world. Russia, we went to the Mariinsky, those huge rake stages all over. And then it was like, you know, you had to travel, and you had to, under City Center was underneath yourself, but you wanted to move.
Did
But
Midsummer
you
feel
couldn't.
very different there?
Oh yes, because we had to cover space, which we didn't have to.
Did he change any of the choreography because of that?
No, not
No.
at all. We just moved bigger and bolder, and he liked us to move a lot in classes also. He didn't want us to hold back and dance underneath ourselves.
Right.
And we learned so much from him in classes because it was all there in the class. prepared you for dancing his ballets always. And he would sometimes be, when he was working on a new ballet, he would try some choreography in his class.
Right, right. The Hermia solo seems like such a composition of opposites. There's a lot of movements that go up and then movements that go really low down. Was that something different from other ballets of his that you had worked on? Was that something that he showed in rehearsals?
I think every ballet I've ever done with Mr. B was different in a way. But this was like really like reaching up and collapsing.
Yeah, stretching and collapsing.
So the collapse is so beautiful. It's very emotional. If you watch it to the front, you can feel what she's feeling when she's dancing. I mean, it's supposed to be dramatic, I guess, but it's passionate and it's quick. So you have to cover a lot of space. Like those arabesques are darting. It's not about posing, or it's about moving and expressing yourself.
What about the pauses? Did they have a particular meaning, or was it just because it was in the music?
Reach, running, and stop and reach. When Mr. B was there, he would set the choreography, and he'd always say, we couldn't go and say, please do this slower or faster. It's always, Mr. Balanchine always set the rhythms with the conductors. And so they were extraordinary ballet conductors. They were just amazing because they had a huge repertoire. And we never rehearsed with the orchestra, you see. We always played, all the rehearsals were with the pianist. And then before a premiere, you maybe get one rehearsal with the orchestra, and it's so different when you hear the whole orchestra. There are moments where you can really, like that attitude turn where she has that, and she does a sweeping movement back. You feel the orchestra, the sweep of the music taking you back for the steps. So the music is key to this variation. It helps you so much. So you can feel it. You can really feel
that kind of swelling feeling. When the movie was made, how did that affect the choreography? Particularly for Hermia, but in general, like you must have had a much smaller space, right?
It was really hard because you had to stay, and it was not easy because you'd stay hours and you had to stay, like making a film, you had to be in your spot. And if you went out of it, you'd be out of the frame.
Right.
So we had a director, a film director, and we filmed it here in New York on the west side, all the way in a movie studio. And they built this it was so beautiful. The forest was magical. It was so beautiful. Oh, it was fun. But it was a little different, the spacing.
Did Balanchine adapt the choreography for the space?
I didn't feel, I did the same, and he was, I was so, I don't know, we were hours and hours doing, marking it out with the set because it was different. Like I'd come through the forest, the entrance would come through the forest. And we had a director there who's directing us all, and Mr. B was there. And it was just really hard. And at the end, after I did my solo, and he came up and he was really so happy, and he said, oh, and you did it in one take. We didn't have to retake it. We did it in, so I did it, because I guess they were stopping and starting. So it made me feel so good. Oh, I did good. I did it in one take. I felt so good that I would please him, because it was a kind of arduous situation.
It must have been so exciting for you at 19 to be doing this role.
I just was so, every time, like my name would go up on the board, I'd go, I didn't know what to expect. And it was always such a pleasure because he was the most gentle. You could hardly hear him speak.
Oh, really?
But he'd show so beautifully. And, I was nervous because I was young and I wanted to have him be proud of me. I wanted to do the best I could because I was 16 when I joined, and he gave me roles at 17, and he made something for me when I was 17.
Which role did he make?
Figure in the Carpet.
Oh, that's right.
I was a judge, and that was thrilling. And then he gave me
Violette
a few
Verdi
roles.
was in that too, right? Violette Verdi?
She was the Sands in the second part. Oh, it was beautiful. And that was a lost ballet. They never filmed it.
Yeah.
And they had serenade costumes in sand, in the sand colors. The same, like what Ashley wore was part of the serenade costume.
The second Ashley.
The second Ashley. Yeah.
Ashley Laracy. What to you was the character of Hermia like? I mean, how did you feel her character?
Oh, I don't know. I read the play because, you know, we knew we were doing Midsummer, so I wanted to get up on it. But it was Mr. Balanchine, so.
Did he ever recite Midsummer? Because apparently he knew it by heart in Russian.
Yeah. I wasn't there when he did that, if he did it. He may have done it.
How is the mime different in the two ballets? I mean, obviously in Harlequinade it's much more classical mime, you know, traditional, and in Midsummer it's more gestural. But how did he show it differently? Did he?
Oh, I don't think it was mime. I think Oberon had mime in it. He had mime. He had a lot more mime. There was a little mime with, you know, Titania, when you say, the child, bring the child over here. And if you think of the words when you do the pantomime, but I don't think for me, I didn't feel like it was pantomime. It was pure dancing.
What you did with amongst the lovers, the sort of gestural language.
It was more dancing. It wasn't, I don't feel like it was, we weren't going, I, you,
right.
It wasn't that.
Well, these are two wonderful variations and wonderful roles. So it was wonderful to see you really get into the details.
I have to do that. Otherwise, I could just watch and say, oh, it's lovely. But I just have to. And working like this, if I would have a week or several days in a row, you could really get to the. It's hard to do something when you've done it for many years a certain way.
Right, to undo that.
And to train is hard. But I know, like, if you do it every day, it just feels natural, and your body will move that way. Right. And also, he sees how dancers move in a different way. So he would maybe make this, if he would have made it on somebody else, it might have looked totally different.
Right.
He would have done it the way they fell or the way they moved.
So they really reflect the way that you move.
Yeah.
These two roles.
Right. Well, I just tried to copy him, and the way I fell was what it ended up
what he
to
kept.
Be.
Yeah.
But he knew Edward Villella. He knew the spirit he had, and he felt that he was really right for that role. And like Suki and Suki Shore and Denny Lamont, they were so wonderful in their roles, their character roles.
Right.
And he did for them.
Pierrot and
they
Pierrette.
were so different than what he did for us. It's his legacy that it's just so wonderful to pass this on and to see the future generations. So my job is to try to help to show them what Balanchine had asked of me, to help them with the musicality or whatever. I just love passing it on.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure.
Well, this was a special moment to have you interviewing me.
Well, it was, just to hear about the creation process, really fascinating stuff. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.